They said productivity came from fertilizer. They said soil was everything. But an experiment buried a few centimeters below the ground began to challenge that narrative. And nobody expected what happened next. No new fertilizer. No secret formula. Just a piece of copper shaped like an improvised antenna, buried next to the roots. It didn't look like technology. It didn't look like modern agriculture. It looked like something anyone would ignore until they saw the results. In the first week, an almost invisible difference. In the second, hard to ignore. In the third, it started to bother those who believed it couldn't work. Because if something so simple works, why doesn't anyone talk about it? And that question changes everything. Decades ago, there were forgotten theories about metals in the field, but almost nobody tested it on a domestic scale. Nothing happened overnight. That's the detail that almost makes people give up too soon. Because some changes begin invisibly, before dominating everything. That's when the first impossible-to-ignore sign appeared. It wasn't one plant. It wasn't two. An entire strip began to respond differently. When you see a plant grow, it might be a coincidence. When a pattern emerges, your certainty begins to crumble. One experiment means nothing. So he repeated it. Same soil. Same water. Same care. Just one variable. And then an uncomfortable question arose. Could the problem never have been a lack of product, but an excess of dependence? Now it wasn't just an impression. Growth began to accelerate where the copper had been buried. And it was at that moment that the neighbors began to appear. Those who laughed now asked questions. Because results always speak louder than opinions. There are old records of farmers experimenting with simple materials around their crops. But that was lost, or simply forgotten. What if the secret was never in what you buy, but in what silently happens beneath your feet? The next discovery left even him speechless. This is where everything became dangerous for the conventional narrative. Because when an exception keeps repeating itself, it begins to look like a pattern. There was no different fertilizer. There was no extra irrigation. Same soil. Same climate. And yet, something was changing. He redid everything. He checked the soil. He checked the moisture. He checked the depth. The more he tried to prove it was a coincidence, the less it seemed like a coincidence. The visible growth caught his attention. But what really startled him appeared where no one usually looks. Perhaps it wasn't 3 times the production. Perhaps it was just perception. But when they started comparing, silence took over. You spend years believing you need to buy more, buy better, buy always, until you realize that perhaps the system taught dependence, and not results. For a long time, the soil was treated as a support. But ancient farmers saw something different, a living system. It wasn't about copper. It wasn't about magic. It was about asking a question that almost no one asks anymore. But when he tried to repeat the result for the 3rd time, something happened that destroyed the entire theory. The 3rd attempt wasn't made to confirm. It was made to disprove the hypothesis. Because if it failed, everything ended there. Same water. Same care. Same soil. Just a minimal change. Enough to discover if it was all an illusion. Bury. Wait. Observe. There's no shortcut to separating belief from reality. And then the unexpected happened. Nothing changed. No leap. No miracle. The result disappeared. That was the most important moment of all. Because when an idea fails, you finally begin to learn. Maybe it was never the copper. Maybe the copper only made him pay attention to other variables that were hidden. When he returned to the beginning, he noticed a detail he had ignored since day one. The greatest result didn't appear where the copper was. It appeared where the soil was least disturbed. And it was at that moment that a question arose that was far more powerful than any buried antenna. This is where everything became dangerous for the conventional narrative. Because when an exception keeps repeating itself, it starts to look like a pattern. When a result seems extraordinary, the question isn't how to repeat it. The question is, what really happened here? What caught his attention? But right next to it, something much less impressive and much more constant existed. Without even realizing it, he had changed two things at the same time. And now the story was starting to make sense. It was frustrating to discover this, but also liberating, because it means that the result might have been closer than it seemed. Old farmers didn't have sophisticated laboratories, but they observed something that many people have forgotten today: healthy soil changes behavior. So he redid everything. No antenna, no tricks, just better observation and more careful management. And the growth returned. Not the same as the initial myth, but real, consistent, repeatable. It wasn't 300%. And that's precisely why it became more interesting. How many things do we attribute to the wrong object, when the answer was in the system all along? The most curious thing is that none of this seemed revolutionary. Covered soil, less disturbance, more observation. Things too simple to seem new. The antenna didn't prove a hidden secret. It revealed a misinterpretation. And that is perhaps even more valuable. Because the real shock wasn't discovering a miraculous technique. It was realizing how easy it is to believe the first explanation that seems to work. Traditional farmers didn't have instant answers. They had cycles, observation, small adjustments repeated over time. Perhaps the hardest discovery to accept is this: sometimes the result improves when you interfere less. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was attention applied where normally no one looks. And perhaps that's the true value of strange experiences. Not because they prove everything, but because they force you to see more clearly. No technology replaces attention. No object replaces observation. But there's one last hidden detail in this story, and it explains why so many people keep looking for complicated solutions. There's something that sells much more than results. Immediate hope. Because believing in a single object is easier than observing an entire system. For years, many people have been looking for the next product, while ignoring what's already happening every day beneath their feet. The most lasting methods rarely begin with grand promises. They begin with better questions. While we look for shortcuts, the soil continues to work silently. In the end, the harvest wasn't 300% greater, but the understanding was. And perhaps that's what the ancients were trying to teach from the beginning. The next time someone promises an impossible solution, first observe what's already working. Because sometimes the greatest discovery isn't finding something new. It's about finally realizing what was there all along. And the experiment ended without proving a hidden secret. But it revealed something more useful. The Earth responds better when we learn to observe before drawing conclusions.